And now that it's the third millennium, Western Christianity is trying to ignore the Eastern followers of Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, again. But this can't happen because Maria, or Master God, won't allow it to happen. The knowledge of the original scriptures recorded in the ancient Aramaic language is beginning to be spread everywhere. Yeah. And that's part of our effort as well, to restore, like him, Victor Alexander, the Apostolic faith. Victor Alexander's efforts to reintroduce the original ancient Aramaic terms and certain critical names and words should help everyone who wishes to know Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus the Messiah, and his teachings, the authentic teachings, and what it originally meant, right? What it originally says, when translated into the nearest English equivalent. Moreover, the shared knowledge between the followers of Yeshua or Jesus will help us bridge the gap in the faith. Yeshua knew that, or Jesus knew that the scriptures would be misinterpreted. Nevertheless, he followed them and showed his disciples how he fulfilled them. He wanted them to spread his teachings regarding the scriptures by his example and their adherence to what he taught them. That is why his teachings are so crucial to an understanding of the prophecies regarding him. Yeshua, or Jesus, was on earth only 33 and a half years, and his mission was accomplished in 3.5 years. The four Gospels depict his life on earth from 4 different perspectives. Matthew is historical, Mark is dynamic, Luke is literary, and John is spiritual. The 4 Gospels tell the story of Yeshua, Jesus, but it is Paul who ties the Old and the New Testament scriptures together. The book of Acts is written by many apostles, but it is clear from the ancient Aramaic literary styles contained that it is Paul who compiled them. He put them all together as one. Paul trained the apostles in the scribal art. His diction is evident throughout the book of Acts, even though it is mostly Shilah who scribed them. So it is evident that Paul wrote some of the chapters himself. So this other guy, Shilah, scripted them or scribed them, wrote them down possibly. The same goes for the letters of the apostles. It is clear that Paul compiled them as well. He trained most of the scribes who wrote them. Paul also compiled John's revelation. He put it together, in other words. John's voice is distinct. However, all 3 texts written by John have the same style. The 3 letters of John, the Gospel of John, and Revelation are clearly the work of one scribe. With the ancient Aramaic, it is possible to go back to the origin of what Yeshua Jesus intended. When Yeshua Jesus came to the world 2,000 years ago, he was faced with great opposition. He knew that it would be so, but he had decided from before that it should be this way. Glory be to his name. He knew everything. However, as a man, he had a life-saving mission to impart. He had to sacrifice himself for the sake of humanity. Nothing was going to work if he had not come to the world. From the time that writing was invented 6,000 years ago until his coming, the prophets had tried to explain the law. They had admonished the people regarding the intentions of the Creator of the universe, but everything written in the scriptures would not suffice, because it takes somebody getting killed before anyone admits that the cause of death was legitimate. Blood is the only thing that works in the end. People don't believe in their hearts or their minds until somebody dies for them. They tried sacrificing animals, burning a portion of their crops, and killing whoever transgressed the law, but nothing was as convincing as the ultimate sacrifice by the Son of Allah, or God, the Son of God himself. It was prophesied that Yeshua, or Jesus, would come to the world and he would sacrifice himself on behalf of humanity. But who was it going to be? Secular historians have written about Yeshua, or Jesus, so we know that Yeshua, or Jesus, did come to the world. He has been known by many names today: Jesus, Emmanuel, Jesus, Yeshua, Yeshua, Michael, and so on. In Aramaic it is Yeshua, but whatever he is called, we know that he sacrificed his life willingly, as it is recorded in the scriptures. The scriptures have well documented this. The only way that worked for us was that the Creator of the universe should send his Son to die for us, a sacrifice that would forever prove his love for us. So there you go. So those who say that God the Father is God the Son, that He's the same, that Jesus is God the Father, are incorrect, because it just says right there, okay, He sent His Son, okay. He didn't send Himself, He sent His Son. The only way that worked for us was that the Creator of the universe, God the Father, sent His Son to die for us, or humanity, a sacrifice that would forever prove His love for us, God's love for us, and Christ's love for us. We do not have to kill anything or anybody to prove our loyalty, since Yeshua or Jesus gave His own life for our sake. People can give their life to save their country or their families. It is well known that such sacrifices are well regarded. Yeah, he who gives his life for his friends, etc., etc. But Yeshua, Jesus, gave His life so that humanity should be able to be spared the final death, eternal damnation, right? Everlasting death, etc. We all die, but what matters most is the final death, the death of the soul and the spirit, death without resurrection. We seek continuity, some way of going on in the spirit. All creatures have souls. Soul is nothing more than the breath of life. Not too sure on that one, because it's the spirit which is the breath of life, given to the soul, which goes from inanimate to animate. So once it's taken away, there's no life. That spirit, there's no life. So that soul is inanimate, right? That's just our way of understanding it. If you breathe, you are a soul. Yeah, you're a living soul. You become a living soul, as it says in Peshitta or Genesis, right? But if we receive the Spirit from the Creator, then we are a human being. Yeah, okay, you become this animate soul, this human being that's come to life, the spark of humanity, right? Is that breath. Jesus had to shed His blood and die for us before we would believe that He loved us. That He also was resurrected is the only hope we have of being resurrected, and so we can have continuity beyond physical death, so we can live on eternally. But what we seek is not just spiritual life, we want physical life after death too. As human beings, we cannot comprehend physical death except if we agree to die for a cause or for someone. One of Yeshua's or Jesus' disciples was frustrated because Yeshua or Jesus said He would suffer and die, and so he said to Yeshua or Jesus, "Then let me go bury my father." Well, one of His possible followers to be, right? And Yeshua said to him, "Let the dead bury the dead. The tragedy of death is when it is spiritual death. Those who deny Yeshua or Jesus don't have the chance for spiritual life. Lazarus was resurrected. He lived a few more years, but he too would die, the eventual first death, the physical death, right? Everybody dies, right? Of the body, death of the body. What we ought to seek is spiritual life, and that life is only through Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus the Messiah. It is the mission of Victor Alexander and his translation project, vo.com. It was the mission of it, right? To present the true teachings of Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, through the gift of translation that He has given him. Okay? That Jesus the Christ, or Yeshua Mashiach, had given Victor Alexander. And he would post letters of Paul following this, right? Order of the books, he goes on about that. Controversies of the Christian canon, Jesus knew everything, and so forth. The controversies over which script was older and which was the dialect of Aramaic that Yeshua or Jesus spoke can all be traced to the denial that Yeshua or Jesus was the Mashiach or Messiah, prophesied by the Scriptures that He was Allah, or God in the flesh, and the Milta of Allah, the manifestation of God, who sacrificed Himself for the sake of humanity. Only by following the ancient Aramaic language can one ascertain such words as the Trinity, or the Triunity, Tla Januma, and their meaning. Only by studying the ancient Aramaic language that was spoken by the prophet Jonah and the people of Nineveh, several centuries before Yeshua or Jesus came to the world, does one realize that this dialect called Asherit, the language of the Asherai, still retains the alphabet in the original order, with the original vowels and the manner of pronunciation peculiar to the Galileans of the time of Yeshua or Jesus. For example, I am the Alap, and the Tau, the Tau, has been changed to I am the Alpha and Omega in the Greek, right? The latter are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. This is not the correct title of Allah or God. Other Aramaic derivatives, such as Arabic and Persian, don't retain the order of the alphabet either, so the concepts of the original scriptures aren't retained in these languages as well. All translations of the Bible retain many of the doctrines and stories of the Bible, but only the ancient Aramaic retains all of them. And Victor N. Alexander's translation is faithful to the original ancient Aramaic language that Yeshua or Jesus spoke and read the scriptures from. The ancient Aramaic and the ancient Hebrew are the only dialects that retain all the consonants of the original scribal language of the Bible, but only the ancient Aramaic of Nineveh retains the original vowel sounds. This is why Victor Alexander has provided so many audio and video clips. Okay, we can bring the audio, but we can't bring the video clips because they're all Flash based. Adobe Flash is no more. Flash Player is no more. So yeah, there's these other ones that don't work, right? They just don't work. So when you hear and see various scripts and pronunciations of Aramaic over the internet, don't be confused by the claims of many that theirs is the oldest or most authentic presentation. There's only one language and one dialect that Yeshua, Jesus spoke, and that's the Galilean of his day, Galilean-Aramaic. And what Victor Alexander has shown all here, through us, we're showing, right, is not a construct of plausible translations or pronunciations of the ancient Aramaic language, like some movies have attempted to do by distorting the story of Yeshua Mashiach and his teachings. His pronunciation captures the true meaning of what Maran Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, said and did 2,000 years ago. So yeah, be careful with the Passion of the Christ, because it's a mumbo jumbo of Arabic and just muttered false Aramaic, etc. Right? You know, it's just as bad as Gary Oldman's Dracula and him speaking that particular language, his native language. It's all gobbledygook and mumbly and all this sort of stuff, as told us by a Romanian lady. It's not Romania, it's just a whole lot of jumble, you know, gibberish. The significance of the ancient Aramaic language. One of the most sophisticated ways to deny the Creator's triune nature, or that triune Godhead, is teaching that the Old Testament was originated in Hebrew and that the New Testament was originated in Greek. This way, the variations in the pronunciation of the alphabet could be used as a tool to manipulate the meaning of the scriptures, words, and nobody would be the wiser, as it sounds logical that the prophets wrote in Hebrew and that Paul wrote in Greek, because the prophets were Jewish and the early converts were Greeks and Romans. It sounds logical, right? Well, Abraham came from Mesopotamia, he's from Ur of Chaldea, right? Or Chaldea, born there apparently, together with his wife Sarah, or Sarai originally. They spoke the ancient Aramaic of that early period, just as Noah, his wife and children had spoken the early version of the ancient Aramaic in Mesopotamia. So they weren't speaking Hebrew, supposedly. That wasn't developed till Isaac's era, which wasn't that much long after Abraham and his people left Chaldea, crossed the great rivers. They made this passage. These people were called the Awer, A-W-E-R. Those who made a journey, those who made a passage, those who crossed over when they went into the promised land, promised Abraham by God. Canaan or Canaan. So They spoke the ancient Aramaic of that earlier period, just as Noah, his wife, and his children had spoken the earlier version of the ancient Aramaic in Mesopotamia. Then there came Isaac, whose wife Rebekah was from Mesopotamia. She was his second cousin. Yeah, that's how it was in those days. And then Jacob married Leah and Rachel, who were also from Mesopotamia, who were also from the house of his great uncle. So they all spoke the same language, the ancient Aramaic. In the centuries that followed the life of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, there came the 12 tribes of Israel, which emerged out of Jacob's 12 sons. They all spoke the ancient Aramaic language. They all spoke it, but the script kept changing and the dialects kept evolving. The Hebrew language then came from Mesopotamia. The word Avrai, or Ivri, Hebrew, came from the word for Passover. The angel of Allah, or God, Aver, in other words, passed over the children of Israel. He delivered them from death. Not too sure what that word is. It looks like Pasianun, P-A-C with a little comma underneath it, double-E-N-U-N, or delivered them, and therefore tikar maybe, or deliverance. I'm not too sure what that word is either, but it means deliverance. P-T-C with the comma underneath it, ha maybe, is how the Jews pronounce the name of Passover in Hebrew even today. And when did the word Jewish come into use to describe the Hebrew people's religion and name? After Jacob's son Judah, Yehuda in Aramaic, settled in Judea, which was named after his tribe, Judea, Yahud. Centuries later, the word for Jew became Hoidaya. In short, all the biblical names were from the ancient Aramaic language. The Hebrew script and dialect evolved out of the original ancient Aramaic language. The actual script was modified after the time of Moses. The commandments were given to Moses in the ancient Aramaic because the ancient Aramaic was older than the Egyptian and it did not depict pictures of animals in its forms. However, the Hebrew script, which is familiar to people studying the Bible in the Hebrew, is a more recent development. It was invented to codify the scriptures, but it led to altered interpretations and therefore the present inconsistencies that resulted in the denial of Yeshua's, or Jesus' triune essence. So today's Hebrew is Israeli Hebrew, which is a revision of the Canaanite Ugaritic, revised around sometime in the early 19th century apparently. The Greek Septuagint and the Latin translations from it deleted the reference to the Trinity. In the modern Hebrew, Torah is translated from the Septuagint for this reason also. It makes no reference to the Trinity. Other translations into Arabic and Persian don't contain the word for Trinity or Kenuma in its original form, Tla Kenuma. The Greek original translation also makes a reference to the word kenome as kenomos. The Greek language lacks many of the letters of the alphabet that refer to biblical terminology. Even the name of Yeshua, Jesus, does not maintain any of the phonetics or letters of the original name, so it comes out as Jesus or Jesus, which is translated as Jesus in English. These deficiencies in the Greek, Latin and the Western languages make it very hard for a true understanding of the meaning of the New Testament, just as the reliance on the Septuagint has made it hard for a true understanding of the Old Testament scriptures. Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, said to the Pharisees and the scribes in Matthew 12:39, a wicked and adulterous generation. Adulterous in that sense definition would mean you've added something to the original, you've changed it, right? It's totally different from what it was originally. A wicked and adulterous generation wants signs. In that sense, adulterous, fornicated, meaning that you've added something to it. Yeah, you've made it different from what it was originally. Say like you have some natural food, and then you go change it, you add this and that to it, and it becomes unnatural. That's what it's referring to. Okay, so a wicked and adulterous generation wants signs. Yeah, so basically, again, it's just basically they've gone from this to that. They've changed. Okay. And they're possibly wicked, corrupt, etc., etc. A wicked and adulterous generation wants signs, and no signs will be given it except for the sign of Jonah the prophet, or Jonah the dove, right? Actually, no, sorry, Jonah the dove was supposedly Peter's name, right? Translated meant that, Jonah the dove. Okay, so except for the sign of Jonah, or Jonah the prophet, for just as Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. The men of Nineveh will rise at judgment with this generation, the Pharisaic generation, right? And hold it accountable, or that particular generation that the Christ was in at the time, right? And hold it accountable. For they repented by the preaching of Jonah, this is the Ninevites, and behold, one greater than Jonah is here now, right in front of them. The language of the men of Nineveh was the ancient Aramaic. Nineveh was the last capital of Mesopotamia. That's the language that Jonah spoke to them. It was and remains to this day the only sacred scribal language of the Scriptures. The original ancient Aramaic church that emerged out of Jerusalem preserved the ancient Aramaic Scriptures in the Lishana Artika, ancient tongue, or old scribal tongue, old tongue. This is Victor N. Alexander's native language. He speaks, reads and writes the modern Aramaic, and he has also studied the ancient form of it over the last 60 years. So he knows most of the dialects of modern Aramaic. So when he does readings from the Scriptures, he tries to pronounce it as accurately as possible, and not just to make it sound more authentic, but to maintain the original meanings of the words, the expressions, or the idioms and figures of speech.